We're live. What up, punks? Welcome back to another episode of the Pop Culture Punks podcast.
Yeah.
I'm your host, Phil, and across from me is your boy,
Josh.
This week, we will be discussing John Wick. We've seen all three of them, and we have a lot of opinions about them.
A lot of opinions.
Mostly good, mostly positive opinions, but
Yes,
we're
sir.
excited to kind of get into it, and it's probably between the two of us, we're not huge action film fans, I don't think.
Yeah.
Or at least like mainstream action films.
Yep.
So
Yeah, I'd
this was
agree.
kind of a cool
Definitely.
chance to dive into that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, just a few notes. That we're going to start doing the stuff at the beginning with links and whatnot, but we have a website now.
As of when you hear this episode.
Yeah. So
which was
not today.
Recorded
but,
a week earlier.
Yeah. So our website is popculturepunks.com.
Yep.
Just
nice and easy.
That's all it is. And if you go there, there's links to merch. So that'll link you out to Threadless and Redbubble.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's links to all of the different sites, right?
Every single
so
platform.
you can go there if you don't know where to find the podcast yet, which I hope you do if you're listening to what I'm saying right now,
Mm-hmm.
because somehow you're listening to it.
Mm-hmm.
But that'll link you out to all the different places, including there's a video tab with YouTube stuff on it as well. And then there's a contact form where you can contact us through that. So if you have any questions, episode suggestions, hate mail, all that stuff, you can go right to our website and then send us stuff through there. So it's all in one convenient spot now.
Yeah.
And we're pretty excited about it.
Yeah.
So
basically, the new conversation will be at the start of every show, us being like, hey, go to popculturepunks.com to find your merch, to find episode links, to find links to all the platforms. And so the way it's organized is there's the podcast tab, and that will have a whole stream of every single episode that releases. So at noon, I set them for noon every Monday. So every Monday at noon, the new one will populate there, or it'll populate on your favorite listening place. And then under that tab is a sub tab called Destinations. And if you go there, it has a bit.ly link to every single place that you can record it. So if you pull it up on your phone or whatever, I think you can pull it up in the app, or it'll probably prompt you to pull it up in the app. But yeah, so if you want to recommend to your friends, you don't have to give them our whole spiel that we used to give for like 10 minutes. You just say go to popculturepunks.com, and and now I'm super proud of it, just like in what I did in like 3 days. But now with like merch and stuff too, there's a merch tab. There's two individual links that will take you directly to the store that will have all the designs available. But there's rotating photos that you can scroll through of our four designs right now. And obviously as those are added to, we'll put new photos up that just kind of have like a t-shirt mock-up. And if you click on that photo, that will actually take you a direct link into whatever the store is. So I know there's like a default version or like clothing item, I think, for the Redbubble stuff, just because they don't have like a selection like the way Threadless does, which is kind of why I like Threadless. But with Redbubble, it's got the same amount of stuff you can customize it with. You just kind of have to scroll through the webpage. So, but yeah, super stoked.
Super exciting.
It's super official. But yeah, like Phil said, so now the contact form. So if you want to reach us, you can still reach us on all your social media stuff. But there is an actual official contact form. So if you actually want to like send a more maybe official feeling thing, you can go to popculturepunks.com, the contact tab, fill out the form, kicks it right to us. Or you can email us at podcast@popculturepunks.com. So we are that much more official as of today. Just super exciting. But any other things we want to shout out? If you're listening to this, you may have heard from us or about us from the Imperious Rex live stream, which we had a blast doing. And now we're back kind of in our neck of the woods, making more stuff and diving into John Wick. So
John Wick.
Anything else? I think that's pretty much it.
I think that's it. Don't want to do too many time-sensitive things.
Yeah, right. Right. It's kind of awkward timing right now. But, all right. So, I'm curious for you, Phil, because we had like a whole planning session, and then all of a sudden you had this realization of, frick, I need to watch 2 films on DVD and go to the theater in like 4 days, essentially. So, in the past when we've done, like when we did the Gears thing, I know we felt really burnt out. I can't remember. There was something else we did where we like tried to binge.
Anime movies.
I think it was the anime movies.
Week,
we did. Yeah. It was in the past when we've done binge things. We've kind of come away like we're never doing that again. And of course, by accident, it kind of happened where I had to watch and catch up in a short stretch as well.
Yeah.
What was your reaction to watching all 3 John Wicks in like, because you literally did it in like 48 hours, didn't you?
I think I watched all 3 in 48 hours. Yeah.
Craziness.
I was pretty stoked. I didn't get burnt out at all because that night we hung out. I went home. It was like 10 p.m. I think, or something like that.
Yeah.
No, it was like 8:30, 10 p.m.
Yeah, I think it was like 8:30.
It was like 8:30, and so I watched the first one after that because it's the first one. They get a little bit longer each time, so the first one's like an hour and a half, I think.
Yeah.
And so I watched through the whole thing, and I was like, dude, that was dope. And so I started the second one right immediately afterwards. I was like, I'm just gonna watch both in one night. But then I made it like 40 minutes in, and I just like started falling asleep. So I was like, I need to pause this because this is the kind of movie you want to like see everything. So, but then I finished it the next morning on Sunday, and then I bought my ticket for Monday.
Nice.
After work. So I think it was like a 48-hour period that I watched all three, and I definitely didn't get burnt out. Like I was just exhilarated the whole time.
Yeah,
so
sweet.
It was pretty crazy though.
Yeah, definitely. So what about the films? And obviously, so to frame the conversation isn't just going to be like reviewing the movies because obviously, that's not usually our MO is just talking about the quality. But I think for us, what was really fascinating is with what John Wick is, it feels like it would be the most easy property for a movie company to just run in the ground and to make every single one worse and worse and worse and worse to the point where it's just a cash cow and it's just like, oh my God, like not to poke at Fast and Furious, but I feel like that's kind of the effect, and that has a cult following. So it's not to say that it's necessarily not good, but they're like 8 or 9 now, like I don't even know how many there are.
For me, the reason I didn't watch them was because I perceived them being in the same class as all these other movies where like it's just action for action's sake in a sense, which it kind of is, but I perceived it in a way of like Mission Impossible or Fast and Furious or like these movies that are just like almost like bro flicks kind of.
Yeah, sure.
And for some, like I'm not into that kind of stuff anymore, so I like just avoided it.
For sure.
But I think the more I saw like trailers for 3 and stuff, I was just like, something about this movie just looks cool. And plus, I think I was drawn to it just because I read some interviews with Keanu, and I was like, this guy just seems so chill. I need to watch his movies more.
Yeah, definitely.
But apparently he's had not a very good streak between Matrix and this, but now he's kind of like
this is his thing.
A renaissance. Keanu Sans.
Yeah, Keanu Sans. But yeah, so the framing of this conversation is more going to be diving into how these films as a franchise have stayed consistently good, and if anything have actually improved in quality, and like what we think are the elements that have attributed to that. Because in something like action, I think action movies, and we've had this conversation before with other genres, where it feels like when a movie is just if it's just a comedy or it's just an action movie or it's just a drama or it's just whatever, it feels bogged down and it feels really corny and cheesy and derivative, and it doesn't feel fun. But you have movies like the latest Jumanji, where it's like, oh my gosh, here we go. But then you watch it and it's an action adventure film, but it's also very funny and it's like comedic, and so it's not, I wouldn't call it a comedy, but there's elements to it that make it funny. Thor Ragnarok was not a comedy, but it was a superhero movie wrapped up in a lot of humor and stuff playing off of itself. John Wick is an action movie, but there's deep, very well done storytelling that is interspersed with it, and like how those things that the John Wick films have capitalized on every single time have propelled it forward to make each one better and better, and to frankly get me excited for what I guess
I never
these
thought
would
I
all
would
be
be
spoilers,
excited
but
for a fourth movie in an action franchise, like
right, exactly.
Usually at this point it's like, okay, well, like you've ran into the ground,
dude, enough.
But it feels like, I'm curious what your favorite one of the
definitely.
3 is, but it feels like it's gotten better. Like it feels like they still get it.
Yeah,
in a sense, like they haven't lost the plot yet.
Definitely.
But I'm curious, what of the 3, what is your kind of
how
shining
like rank
movie?
them? Yeah. So first off, I want to say that I did not dislike any of them. So this order is not necessarily in terms of like quality. I think it's more just the specific effect. I would say 3, 1, and then 2. I think specifically 3, the way it ends and what it sets up has me so excited, and I think 3 was an evolution that capitalized on the emotions I felt in 1, which is, I want this guy to just kick butt. I want him to murder all these people, and I want him to avenge his dog and his car and all. It's a revenge flick is number 1, but I feel like 3 was a revenge movie out of desperation, and I think there was like another element that was in it that made it more exciting. And now what they've set up with the next movie coming in, I think I'm just even more juiced because now you're like, it's like an assassin war. Like, we've been set up that there's all these rules, but now because of how the story's been told, the rules have been broken, and now there's this, everything naturally has been like shattered, and so there's people who they're out for blood, which, you know, that's not new, but now they're out for each other's blood, and everything has been kind of, you know, undone. And so now it's going to be interesting to see how all the lore and all the things that they've set up starts combating itself, and like what other rules we find out about, and like the high table, and who are these people in the high table. And I can't remember the name of like the the big guy, but this like ambiguous dude who's like the one, and he's just like this guy,
the high table,
but he's like just this guy who's
hanging
like
out in the desert.
Like hanging out in the desert. But you know, but even that scene and like just everything that they built into it was like, man, there's just a lot of emotion that is captured really well in these movies. I think the second was one, and I think one specifically because it gave me kind of the same thing I felt when I watched the Thomas Jane Punisher, where you want to see this guy win. Like, you want to see this guy just get everybody. And it's fun to see an OP character, you know, where the whole John Wick journey is not him becoming the greatest assassin in the world. We're thrust right into the middle of it, where he is like, when people say John Wick, they're like, well, it's been a nice life. You know, like that's the assumption.
It was good meeting you.
Right. Like, I think Winston has a line in 3 where he's like, you know, well, every assassin in the world is, you know, just got a text and all these things and blah, blah, blah. And so he's like, so essentially it's a fair fight. You know, like that's, but they stick to that. And there's never a moment where people are like, oh, John's dead now. Like, he's screwed. Every single time they're like, I don't know, dudes. Like, we might be boned. And I think it's fun. It's fun having a non-superhero character be like, get that experience. Like, there's like just a mortal man who's fighting for something, who is feared by everybody in the world. And I think that was getting to jump into that in the very first story in John Wick 1. And just that one was really emotionally charged too, just with like his wife and the setup with the puppy, and like, you know, spoiler, like his dog gets murdered and, you know, or killed, and it's like the saddest thing alive. And then you're like, the entire movie, you're like, you shoot that guy in his face for killing your dog, you know. But and I think 2 I put last, not because it wasn't good, but I think because I didn't feel as much, in comparison to the other 2, I didn't feel as much emotional tension. Whereas like 3, John Wick is trying to survive, and every time he runs it, like everybody on the street is potentially a threat. Like literally, not just like some schlep who's gonna like try and punch him, but like they're all carrying guns. Or there's like a lady with a violin who's like is like a machine gun. You know, everyone in 3 is a threat. In 1, John Wick is out for blood, and it's like, I want to see him get to that guy who killed his dog. And like, whereas 2, I felt like there wasn't as much build up to it. Like, it was more like, okay, go kill my sister, and then he does, and it's like, okay, well, survive the repercussions of that. And then there's a great and there's amazing fight scenes in 2, you know, like the silencer, like secret shootout in like that crowd of people, and stuff like that. But I think there just wasn't overall the grounding of an overall goal that they were trying to achieve.
It's kind of funny because the order I would put them in is probably 2, 3, 1.
Oh, interesting.
And I think the reason I like 2 so much is because I think 1 on its own is a really good movie, and I think that movie could just be one and done, like standalone, great action flick. Yeah. Like, they hint at a lot of lore and stuff, but like, we don't need to know anything. It's kind of like, when it's done in a sense. Yeah. But then 2, kind of like when the guy comes and gives him that little like coin thing with the bloody fingerprint, you're like, oh frick, what is this? Like, is this like some blood pact thing that these assassins have between each other? And like, you kind of get the sense that like they're all adversaries, but also like abiding by this very strict code, and they're willing to like work with enemies and stuff. But I think the reason I like 2 so much is because it starts off as just like, oh, he's an assassin again, basically, because he has to help this guy reluctantly. And he's kind of like reluctantly doing this job, but then you get to see kind of his moral compass starting to shift a little bit to like, I'm not back in. Like, I don't want to do this job in the first place.
Yeah,
so like,
that's a good point. Yeah.
I don't even really want to kill this lady. And you kind of, when he finally gets to her, you kind of like, he's like, I'm not going to do it. And she just offs herself, basically.
Which, she's like, I'm not dying by you. And I was like, dang.
And so like, but then when, at that point, the movie kind of flips, and it becomes a revenge tale again. And it's kind of like this intermingling of 2 types of kind of like the two worlds that he's trying to exist in at the same time. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I just find it interesting that it's kind of that shift from him being out, and then in 1 he kind of comes back in, but not really. He's just trying to get revenge.
Mm-hmm.
But then in 2 you see that shift of like, oh, he's never getting out of this. Like,
yeah.
it's kind of like the futility of violence. Like,
Yep.
because he's so entrenched in this world, like he's never going to escape. People are going to keep coming after him, calling him back
Yeah.
for things.
There's
And
never,
you kind of get
you're never
that-
truly out.
Yeah, you get his kind of worldview and his place in the world a little bit more fleshed out. So I think
Yeah, definitely.
that's why I like that more. And I liked a lot of the...
Those are good points. Yeah.
I think I liked a lot more of the fight scenes in 2 and 3.
Oh,
like,
the mirrors one in like the end is
Yeah.
incredible.
like the mirror scene in 2, that was 2, right?
yeah.
Yeah. And then I find it funny because in 2 you get it a lot more, where like you get the sense that everybody knows that he's like the boogeyman, the Baba Yaga,
Baba Yaga.
and like they know that he shouldn't be trifled with.
Yeah.
And yet everyone keeps trifling with him. Like
Exactly.
the Italian guy turning on him, like, you knew that he was going to do this to you.
Yeah.
Like, you keep telling these legends and stories about him killing a guy with like 3 guys with a pencil in a bar or something. Like,
Right.
you know that he's merciless and he will come after you, but yet you still poke the bear.
Right,
And
exactly.
I like that, kind of like, again, the violence thing. Like,
Yeah.
the world, even though they know that they shouldn't, they still do it because they're also like
They're all in the
self-absorbed
same
and kind of, like,
cycle.
in the
Yeah.
same cycle.
Definitely.
And you kind of see that trailing into 3.
yeah,
So
for sure.
I think that's why I would put them in that order.
No, I think
Plus,
that
I
makes
think-
a lot of sense.
For some reason, in the first one, the dog dying to me just got to me.
You're like, no,
And then the
it's
second one, like the dog lives, I'm like, yes.
yes, 10 out of 10, perfect movie.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah,
Um,
the scene in 1 that just stuck with me was when he like passes out. He's like laying there, and the dog's across the room, like dying or whatever. And then he wakes up, and then the dog's laying
Right
next to him
him.
with a trail of blood.
Yeah.
So like in the dog's dying moments,
It,
he
like, went to him.
crawled to him to comfort him as he was passed out.
Yep.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I
It's
can't
just
handle this.
ruined. And then he's like crying, like petting this dying puppy. And then
Mhm.
it's like the next shots is him like burying it. And then you get this like, he's going in the basement. He's busting up the cement.
sledgehammer.
He's pulling out the
Yeah.
guns. Like, bro is pissed.
And I
Like,
think,
oh,
like-
here we go.
And I think that moment was kind of what set up the reason why I like these movies, because a lot of action films are just take place in our world,
Mhm.
and it's kind of like you have to take at face value that these normal people somehow have arms that are like guns, basically, like Henry
Right.
Cavill cocking his biceps
Right.
in that commercial or whatever.
Right.
But in this world, they kind of set up like the silliness of it in the first movie a little bit. Like
Mhm.
they keep saying like this was all because of a dog in a car. Like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
eliminated the entire Russian mafia because of a dog in a car.
Right.
And kind of like from his perspective, obviously it's more than that. But to everybody else, they're like, "What are you doing, dude? Like you
Right.
were out. You had your chance, and you just
Yeah.
came back in just because of a dog in a car." And like that whole like goofiness and silliness of the first movie kind of sets up like the world of
Yeah,
the movies. Like
definitely.
it takes place in our world, but not. It's like an alternate world where like it's still New York, I think, but
Mhm.
but there's like this like group of assassins called the Continental, or like I think the hotel is called the Continental.
Yeah, the
but, like,
hotels that house, because there's
Yeah.
Continentals all over the world, it sounds like. And then
there's the high table, and then
Yep.
it's kind of like it
They're
just
kind of the
seems like
governing
everybody in
order.
the world is an assassin somehow, because like
And it-
and it's kind of like this interesting
yeah.
world where like if everybody was somehow an assassin on some level or something, and it kind of like sets up the goofiness and like almost like this would be unbelievable in any other world.
Right.
Like John Wick should have been dead like 2 movies ago because nobody can sustain this much beatdown for
Right.
3 straight days or whatever.
Right.
And like at the end of 3, and he's just like still beating these like crazy like Japanese dudes or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
and he's just
That
like,
was such a dope fight.
I know.
I
and
love
it's,
that.
And I think that's why I appreciate the movies as a whole, is because of that like believability. They kind of like show that the world is a little bit different than ours, where like
Yeah.
okay, you can suspend your disbelief about people's ability
Right.
to do things and kind of
Yeah.
like just believe that John Wick is the best at everything.
Yeah. It's weird because it's almost like a comic book movie in a way,
Mhm.
where it's grounded in a reality that we can comprehend, but there's enough supernatural fanfare and like these crazy gunfights, and the fact that like John Wick is able to like kill 30 dudes with like no sleep and traveling all these places.
Think he eats
and
at all.
Right, it's like we never see the man eat, like but I think it's things like that where you could get nitpicky, like, well, that's not believable. But I feel like the whole thing, I watched some of the behind the scenes on the John Wick 2 DVD. It was interesting because the directors and the writers were talking about like, we kind of want to create this world to be like, you don't know who's an assassin, like everybody's a threat. And I think that's cool. And one of the things I wanted to dive, so I kind of had like 3 key points for me personally of like why I think these movies are fantastic and why I think they keep getting better, and if they keep doing these things, they will stay fantastic. Was deep lore, show don't tell storytelling, and then creative / unconventional action. So I think the deep lore, number 1, is kind of like what we've been alluding to. It's not just that there's like, oh, there's assassins. It's like there are assassins, but it's more complicated than that.
They abide by like a super
exactly.
strict
There's
code.
like
It's almost
super
like
strict codes.
Medieval, like Middle Eastern, almost like a little bit of Eastern, like Asian influences to it, and
exactly. Like even like 3, he's having that showdown with that one guy on the motorcycle, and he literally is just like crawling and like slaps his hand on the steps, and the guy like comes up and is about to stab him or shoot him, and then the concierge comes out and he's like, this man is on continental grounds, and he's like, frick. And then they both go inside and like sit on the couch next to each other.
And then he starts telling him how much he like.
He's like, dude,
looks up to him. Yeah,
I'm your biggest fan. Like, but it's things like that shape the world where it's not weird, because the whole thing is there are these strict rules, and the movies never break these rules. And there's new rules added, but the lore is that none of those rules are get out of free card. Like,
there's no like retconning.
Exactly. Like there's nothing that, like John Wick going to this like grand master of the whole assassin order, it doesn't just get him out free. He has to pay a price. And that's the whole theme of everything. And I loved, it was interesting. Like one of my favorite explanations was when they're in, it's like Halle Berry's character, which she was awesome, dude. Like the two dogs, German shepherds, and like just like sending them like bite a guy in the nads, and then she comes in, like caps him in the face, and like sends, it's so dope. But I think what was cool is like when they're talking with her old boss, and he's kind of even just explaining like, these coins, because he's like the miller or the, I don't know what, I think it's like a mill would like press gold coins and stuff. Whatever. The gold coin producing guy, the minter, he like explains that all these gold coins that they have are like packs. This isn't like money. It's not like, oh, this is worth $300,000. It's like, this is a service. Like you accumulate. And to me, what's awesome is how the lore is set up, and how the show, and specifically the show don't tell storytelling is you've seen John Wick has like thousands of these things. Yep. Like he has boxes of these things. And so the implication when you find out that information is all those movies have subliminally, without directly stating to you, set up that John Wick knows people, and people know John Wick, and John Wick has a lot of favors that he can call in. And so even with the doctor, he's like, I've got 5 minutes, doc. Like he like holds up a coin, and the guy's like, oh, like dang it. But you have all these like emotions and reactions and people doing things that all align with the very strict, specific rules that everything sets up. And because of that, I think it just makes the movie so enjoyable, because you're never like, what? Like, I didn't know you could do that. Or like, oh, well, you can do this, but not that. That never happens.
Because whenever a character breaks a rule that you in your mind have figured out, they face the repercussions of that.
There's consequences.
So there's consequences.
Exactly.
Even in the movie, there's consequences for breaking these rules.
Exactly.
And so it makes it believable, because, okay, this isn't our world. This world has different rules. The people behave differently based on those rules. And then we can kind of like go from there.
Definitely.
Which I agree with that. I think the movie, because of that, allows you to just enjoy the action moments. And so like when he's just going ham on 30 dudes with a pistol, and he's just like wrecking dudes, or like with the freaking shotgun in the catacombs or whatever. Like,
number 2.
And you could just feel the blasts of that shotgun. Like, so like, it's just
so good.
It's so intense. And you almost, even on the rule level, when you think about like guns having bullets, there's so many times where like I don't know if the bullet count is actually accurate in the movie, but they give you the sense that he has a limited number of bullets,
and he's
like,
counting.
And he's counting because like he'll like have to reload his clip, or like he'll have to take a gun off a bad guy, or like he actually has to reload his shotgun every 2 shots. Like he only has 2 shots, or like he doesn't have enough time to put any more than 1 shot in his shotgun before he can get the next guy. So it's just like boom, boom, and then a guy face, comes up too quick and
like slides the clip in point blank, bam. Like and I think that was the thing of like the creative unconventional story or action is. I feel like we've been conditioned with action movies that there is this, it's unrealistic, and it's supposed to be, you know, like Tom Cruise hanging onto a jet, like whatever, like that's supposed to be that way. But I think in terms of the fights, they almost feel so choreographed that you're like, it's a dance. And I think visually you can do really cool things with that if you're actually communicating who's in power, who's in charge, who's whatever. You know, I think like that's kind of what, as obnoxious as anime fights can be, I think that's what makes some of them so cool, is there is this dance of information where this person is in the has the upper hand, but now this person has the upper hand, and this person figured out how they can counteract this, and it's just like back and forth.
Yeah, and in John Wick especially, like
John Wick is not gonna really kill
like,
you.
Like you know for a fact that he's gonna win because of the way that they set up the world, and you know he's gonna win the fight, but during the fight you lose that. You lose the belief that he's gonna win because of the way that they choreograph the fights, in a sense, because even while he's fighting, it doesn't always feel like he's as coordinated as he should be if he's gonna like get out of this.
Right.
Because like sometimes he'll falter, sometimes he'll do this, or like the guy will get the upper hand on him, but then all of a sudden he just pulls out this like super judo move and just like somehow like does a triple turn around him and drops him to his back and stuff, and it's
like
just
point blank shoots him, lays on the ground as the other guy's coming around the corner, shoot. Like there's this awareness that he as a character is so much fun to spend time with because he's like doing things that you'd expect action movie stars to do. Because I think that's one of the reasons I fell out of love with action movies is because when you're watching them and they don't do something that it's like, I'm out of ammo, you're literally laying next to a dead guy that you just killed that has a full clip. Like, grab it. Like, like what? Like, why are you not picking that up? And so, and I think especially as gamers, it's even worse because we're like, dude, if you don't have ammo, you go hunting for ammo, you know?
Yeah.
And so there's all these conflict situations that they get thrust into in your generic action movie, I feel like, where it almost is boring because it's like, well, like, do something. It's like, well, no, we have to wait because the bad guy has to come over the corner and monologue, and they have to like get into this whole, you know, whatever.
Yeah, I think that this movie benefits from that because
definitely
this series does, because there's not a lot of moments with monologues and dialogue, and like people don't really get the chance to talk very much.
Right.
I think 3 did that a little bit more.
Yeah.
Which is probably why it was a little bit longer. But 1 and 2, like there's not a ton of talking moments, and even when John Wick talks, it's very like short and to the point, kind of like, I'm just here to kill
really
you.
Like everybody too.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's cool is the dialogue is written in a way that no one wastes words. Not a single person, not a single character that is an assassin wastes words. Like everyone is in business, and it builds in to the world. Like no one's like, hey, how's it going? I just got this new thing. You want to come check it out? It's like everyone's like, you know, Mr. Wick.
Like the scene in 2, I think, when what's his name, Cassian or
yeah,
whatever, when they like see each other across the room, and they both know what's happening now.
Exactly.
And just based on John's face, you can tell Cassian knows that he killed her. And they look at each other. He's like, "You back in?" And I think John says no or something.
He's like
kind of. And he's like, and he just like nods. And then all of a sudden they like break out into a gunfight, and you're like, "Whoa, what the heck?"
Yeah.
And there's not like, kind of like you get the sense,
killed my master kind of thing.
Yeah, you get the sense that they can read like body language really well.
Yep.
And like they don't need to talk because
exactly,
like we're not here to talk, we're here to shoot.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. I don't know.
Definitely. Yeah, and I love the little moments too. And so I'm kind of like mixing all those 3 things together because I feel like they kind of intertwine, and I feel like that's what makes these movies, this franchise, so awesome, is all the things mesh together. Like it's not just deep lore minus show don't tell storytelling, because I think that you can have crazy deep lore, but if it's just like you're bogged down in it and it's just like we have to, if every other person was explaining like, John, this is why I'm trying to kill you, then it's like, well, I don't really care because I'm not going to see you.
We come to the movie because we want to see like this
crazy
assassin to just go nuts and
exactly.
like revenge and all this stuff, but we stay because there's like these little hints and like little story tidbits that kind of draw us in.
Like a complicated world.
Like, man, I kind of want to understand this and
right.
figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
But they don't give you too much where you're like, oh, okay, like let's get to the next scene where he's shooting more guys.
Yeah, exactly. And I just love all the things. Like, there's just so many things that always build into the complexity of everything. And I think one of the cool things too is, and I wrote this down at the end after I saw 3, and I'll just kind of read it. It was just kind of like it might sound disjointed, so I apologize if it's kind of all over the place. But there are rules to the assassin underworld, and no one, even John Wick, gets out of them. New rules or characters are revealed to us via like Sophia, who was Halle Berry's character, and other people, but they never get John out of trouble, and in most cases, they actually only create more trouble. As a result, we get to see John's badassery in full effect as he fights for his life and the ability to remember the love of his wife. And now each fight is infused with purpose. This is mainly for 3. Each fight is infused with purpose, survival. These movies aren't written as action for its own sake. They are written in a way that gives every moment weight as everyone is trying to survive.
It's kind of funny because it reminds me of The Matrix in some way.
Yeah,
where which I think these movies are directed by his stunt double from The Matrix.
Interesting.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
But in The Matrix, like, if you just watch those movies without digging deep at all, on the surface, it's just an action movie with dope scenes and cool choreography and, like, all this awesome stuff with guns and martial arts and whatnot. But, like, if you look behind the surface, there's a commentary on, like, technology and society and stuff like that. And I feel like John Wick has the same feeling where, like, in some sense, it is action for action's sake because, like, there's just these amazing dope fight scenes where, like,
riding on a horse down the street and
it's all these really specifically set up scenes where you know it's going to pay off amazingly.
Yeah.
But when you look under the surface, it's almost this message about, like, this cycle of violence that John Wick has, like, and people keep reminding him, like, you keep coming back for some reason, even though you had your chance. Like, and we still don't know exactly what he did to get out.
Yeah.
But, like, people keep reminding him, like, you had your out and you came back. Why? Why did you come back? And he doesn't usually answer them.
Right.
And so it's kind of like this weird futility, like, of violence and the cycle of, like, revenge and stuff that is kind of like the undercurrent of.
Definitely.
And like you said, it all comes down to survival at this point because, like, I don't even think he knows why he's doing any of this anymore. Like, he's just kind of like, frick, and he's, like, surviving now, basically trying to, like, stay alive.
And I feel like that's part of his character that's super cool, is that he is a man of honor. Like, he is the most intense assassin that you do not want to run into on the street if you're on the other end of his gun. But he has a code, and he knows, and that's why, like, in 2, when he breaks the code in the Continental and kills that guy, it's a revelation of his character. He's like, you did not leave me alone. Like, I'm the most pissed at you. I did your job. You didn't let me live, and now, like, I'm gonna kill you. Like, because I'm so pissed that you took me away from what got me in it. But I think, and this is one of the things I loved about 3, that it almost felt like a direct commentary to just, and I was gonna say, like, action movies in general, but I really feel like even just creatives or writing or film in general. It was just like he's having that conversation with Sophia at her place, and she's like, why are you here? Like, you don't, like, you're done, I'm done, leave me alone. And she says something where, and Winston says something later too, where it's just kind of like, kind of sucks, doesn't it? She's like, consequences, and he's like, yeah, consequences, like classic Keanu delivery. But I think what permeates these 3 films that I love, and I think is just so, it just doesn't exist in a lot of other creative content, is just people putting characters into conflict and then getting them out of it. Like, consequences. Everything has consequences. Whether you do or do not do something, that has consequences. And I think we're disconnected from movies or from books or whatever when we're reading them, when we feel like when someone does or does not do something, that nothing happens. That it's like, well, like, that doesn't matter then, so why is it in here? You know, because a story is a curated, it's curated information of events. And so if I'm telling you all the events and, like, there's really no purpose to it, you know, or nothing happens, or this person doesn't have to change or grow or make a decision, it's not interesting. And why John Wick is interesting is there's consequences for him going after the Russian mafia. Now he's kind of back in, and people are kind of confused because And I wonder if that's one of the subliminal things in 2 that's kind of alluded to, is that the reason this guy comes back is because he's like, oh, John's back kind of on the field. Like I've been hearing that you've been, shaking things up with the mafia and you've been stirring up trouble. And then that creates this whole set of conflict where now he has to go do this job that he doesn't want to do. And after he's done, he's trying to chase down this guy, and this guy goes to the Continental, and this guy's rubbing it in his face. Like, I could live here for years. I could just die. Bang! Right through the head. And you're like, you weren't supposed to do that. And even Winston's like,
you shouldn't have done that.
Like, John, what have you done? And that spawns a whole movie. And there's a whole movie that comes out of that one decision. And then Winston makes decisions in 3. And then there's consequences out of that. And there's other characters who do things. And there's consequences. And so no decision that's ever made, even if there's a new rule that comes to the limelight, the characters still have to make decisions based on that rule, and that drives the movie forward. Like, I feel like these movies never are going backwards or left to right. Like, they're always going forward. And I think, my prediction for this franchise is like they could go forever, because
if they keep it consistent, they could.
Yeah. And I think in a weird way, these movies almost function as like isolated short stories in a way. John Wick 1 is John Wick loves his wife. She just died. She bought him a puppy before she died to like remember him. He's caring for it. He's loving for it. He's like out of the business. But then these a-hole Russian mafia dudes come, they kill his dog and they steal his car, and he's pissed. And he's like, I'm going to murder all of them. And by the end of it, you're like, that was an awesome movie. But then the next one rolls around and it's like, hey, John, I kind of heard you're back in the field. And so then there's the consequence.
Well, even that one, they introduced the rule of like the coin thing.
Exactly.
And that guy's specifically calling in a favor that he's like, I helped you get out.
Yeah.
Now I need your help.
Yes.
And he's kind of like, and then it kind of goes down that trail. So it's like, even then, the consequence of him choosing to work with this Italian guy who somehow did something that helped him like get out so he could marry this woman and settle down. But now he's calling it in because he's heard he's back.
Right.
And it's kind of like you're seeing, and then later in the third movie, he has his coin for this other woman, and he comes and she's like, no, and he throws the coin down and she's like, no, and he's like, coin, you have to do it.
He's like you have to do it.
And it's like you every moment you're seeing consequences for the rules that the high table or whatever it is set up. Or like he goes to that ballet lady and has like this thing, and she's like, you can't be here, like the high table will kill me if I help you, and he's like shaking this like cross or whatever, and she's like, oh, fine. And she like helps him, and he uses his ticket or whatever.
Right.
But then she gets the sword through the hands or whatever from the high table, and it's every step of the way, like every action that has happened in the movie has consequences for other people.
Exactly.
And stuff, and it's so cool.
Yeah, definitely. And I think all the consequences are believable within the world that has been created for us. Like, it's not like, oh, well, the consequence of like gravity, like falling off a building or shooting somebody or getting shot.
Yeah.
It's like consequences in decision making. And I think each decision or each pushback of a decision that each character gives, like Sophia not wanting to do it, is just as interesting as John being like, this is your job. Like, you need to do this because this is the code. And she's like, screw your code. Like, I'm done. Like, my daughter's safe. I'm out here living my life. Like, go away. And that's a piece of her character. Like, she's just like John in a way where she's like, leave me out of this. I don't want to be a part of this anymore.
Yep.
And, and like what Winston does and how all this stuff happens, like everything is just a reaction. And I feel like that's just lost. I don't know what it is about other stuff, like where they're afraid to like put characters through things. And I think that's why Endgame, thinking back as like another example, is so good, is there's consequences and people have to make decisions that can't be reversed in a sense. And when people do that and they actually have to pay for it, I think there's just more weight, and we have to actually wrestle with the fact that Endgame spoiler right now, if you haven't seen it in the last 3 weeks, but that Tony Stark dies and he gives his life to making sure the world is finally safe.
Yeah.
And there isn't a like, oh, well, like we can go back in time and use the stones and do all this stuff and blah, blah. It's like done. It's done. Tony just gave his life and gave the ultimate sacrifice to keep the world in this multiverse portion or whatever safe. And I think like the amount of lore that we probably haven't even been privy to is going to be insane, and how
and
4
I
is
think
shaping
the balance
up.
that they, I think that's why I appreciate it, because it still is an action movie.
Yeah.
And it doesn't shy away from admitting that that's the fact.
Yep,
Like,
absolutely.
nope, there's just a ton of gunfights, ton of knife fights, ton of fist fights. Like,
Yeah.
there's everything you'd want in an action fight. There's motorcycle fights and horse fights and all this stuff. Like, on the surface, it's just a bombastic, crazy, intense action movie that most people are probably not going to watch if they don't like seeing blood spattering everywhere and people dying left and right. But, like, there's so much stuff undergirding it, and I think just thinking about all the scenes where you get those small snippets of like, oh, is that a rule? Or like, oh, is that what that means based on what just happened? Like,
yeah.
Like, kind of trying to piece together what those fingerprint coin things are, and piecing together what the gold coins mean. And like, when he's in the library and he checks out that book, like, oh, does this library have a specific section where these assassins like hide their stuff, like almost like a secondary bank? Because the tall dude comes there and is also checking out a book, and like,
and just how he kills that guy too is just like brutal.
By the way, there's also a book fight.
Right, exactly.
He
and
cracks
he kills
a dude's neck with a giant book.
He breaks a dude's neck with a book by like laying his head and like smacking it. It was just like, this is he's a maniac, but it's so dope because you're like, this is John Wick. John Wick just killed this 7'5" dude in a one-on-one fist fight with a book. Like, it's
and
just
it's kind
nuts.
of like all those little moments are like an example of the show don't tell thing.
Yeah.
Because I think if the movie was about what the lore is, it wouldn't be interesting. Because the point, like, on the surface, it's like, why would I want to watch a movie about a guy who can't be killed, basically?
Yeah.
Like, apparently, like, John Wick can't be killed. Like, that's kind of just what the universe in these movies accept.
Right.
In some ways. And I don't think that would be interesting on its own.
Yeah.
But because of the way that they set up the world, it's interesting just enough, and they show us just enough to keep us trailing along, and everything they show us pushes us towards a different end. And it's kind of like when one movie wraps up, then, like you said, you see the consequences of the actions in that movie trailing off into the next one. And it kind of just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And like we were joking at dinner with the Imperious guys, like eventually it's going to be John Wick in space, and he has to assassinate the entire universe or something because he blew up the Earth because he couldn't get out of it.
Right, exactly.
And it's like I would watch that if they did it right.
Right, exactly.
And I think it's the show don't tell that works really well in this movie, because if they got too bogged down in the lore and all this stuff, I think it would just be uninteresting, because like we would just get it right away. Like, I think the reason I'm so interested and drawn along is, one, I want to see the awesome fights, but after a while that stuff just gets boring. Like after a while you get sick of just seeing fight after fight after fight. So then every time there's a fight, you get this little snippet of conversation, or you like, oh, he must have had a relationship with this person in the past, and you kind of like,
and it was rocky,
it continues
or
to
it
like
was
pull
great,
you forward
or
with either like action or like small lore snippets. And I just love how it constantly is moving forward, and it feels like you're just in a mad dash towards the finish in a sense. And you're enjoying it along the way. So.
Yeah, that's a good point of like how John Wick, I don't go into these movies thinking like, oh, John Wick's gonna die. And I kind of have this feeling, like John Wick 4, like there's going to be a fourth movie. Like, I don't think he's going to die. But I think the reason why that's interesting is because he's the ultimate survivalist. It's not because he's the ultimate man of luck. He is the ultimate killer, and he is the ultimate human being. Like, he is the ultimate assassin. There is no one who knows how to survive and how to kill like John Wick. And because of that, that's why I bank on the fact that he's not going to die. It's not like, well, the last, movies I've seen, he just like dodged a bullet or like whatever, literally, it's he chose to do that. He chose to be the best killer in the world. And so now we're, as the fans, getting to reap, the storytelling of
we're almost
being placed at that point in time.
We're almost like learning the story backwards.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because throughout the movies, you're like, you already know he's going to win. So now we're kind of figuring out like how. Like, how is John Wick this way? So you see he was trained by this like ballerina lady or something.
Right.
And you get a snippet of all these young dudes like just
throwing each other
around. You're like, oh, is this where he was? Like, was he trained in this like assassin school or something? And throughout the last three movies, you kind of get snippets of his past and figuring out like why he is this way. So
yeah, definitely.
And I don't know if it's building up towards any great reveal, but it's just interesting to kind of like hear his relationships and like just get small little things. It's cool.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think I just realized too, I should have explained like show don't tell, because we did that in our last episode, and I think it was actually helpful. Yeah. Kind of diving into like what a payoff is, like what some of those terms are. like one of the hardest things to do in like really good storytelling, whether that's written, visual, musically, whatever, is what's called show don't tell. And what that means is essentially like if I'm trying to explain that maybe there's a rule in this universe. So perfect couple examples. There's kind of this unwritten thing that seems to happen is if you tell another assassin that you're in a fight with that you could kill, but you're not going to kill them, you tell them, I'll be seeing you. And this is an actual example from the John Wick movies. So the showing there is that essentially John Wick has chosen, specifically out of his own volition, I'm going to let you live. There is nothing else in the Assassin rulebook or in the world in general that is making me do this. I, as John Wick, am choosing to let you live. And so they'll be telling each other, like, I'll be seeing you. Like, that's the way of, like, telling someone, like, I'm letting you go, essentially. And I'll let you, because he, like, has this fight in 3 where, you know, he, like, is talking to the guys on the ground who are Japanese. And I think he says it in Japanese where he says, I'll be seeing you. And the two guys are, like, laying there after having their butts kicked, and they, like, look at each other, and they're just, like, they, like, like, fake like they're dying or whatever.
Yep.
And in the second one, with that female assassin who's trying to kill him, she's like lying on the ground after he stabbed her, and she says like she like uses sign language to say like I'll be seeing you, and he's like no you won't, and she dies. And so there's the showing there is that phrase carries weight. That phrase carries essentially the rule that or like this personal gift to you of like I'm letting you live. Now, if they were gonna tell me that, which is what you don't want to do, every time someone said that, they'd be like, I'll be seeing you. Well, why are you letting me live? Well, what did I do? Why are you letting me live? Why do I get to go away this time?
Just kind of
exactly. Like they'd have to dive into this whole reason of like, well, why are you letting me live? And like, why are they, you know, and then the telling becomes about the details of why that person made that decision and then giving every last reason and like, and then you just get bogged down and like, does it really matter? Like the moment's ended. Like the moment has been paid off. The moment has been shown. Another example, the one that we mentioned that more comes into play in 2 and 3 is there's these coins that have a thumbprint, and essentially you can go to another assassin. What's shown is this guy comes to John Wick in the beginning of 2 and says, John, I need a favor. And he's like, I'm out. And then he slides this coin across him. And then you see John go, oh, frick. Like, and he's not like, no, I told you that I would never do this favor for you, even though regardless, like, he doesn't spout every last thing that happened to get that coin. He just knows, like, we see John just knows this means I have to do something I don't want to do. And there's a bloody thumbprint on the one, and there's an empty one on the other side. And it's like, in blood, he has to fulfill this wish. And until he does it, this coin is open, and it can be traded in.
And it's some sort of like blood pact or something.
Right.
But they don't tell you any of that.
Exactly.
Because at the beginning, he gives him the coin. John kind of like takes it apprehensively and is like, fine, what do you need me to do? Kind of.
Yeah.
Like, you know, he doesn't want to do it, but because he took this coin, that must somehow mean he has to do it.
Yep.
And then towards the end, or towards the middle, I guess, Winston opens that giant book, and then he like finishes off the blood thing and kind of like shows how the contract is closed in a sense.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah. And
So
then they do it again with
Right.
the lady, and you kind of get they show you how it works rather than telling you how it works.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of like piece together.
Definitely.
Which I think for the audience, it makes it more interesting because like if you just tell me how it works, then I'm like, oh, okay. And then you don't have to like think about it. But if you don't tell me how it works and I have to piece together how it works through the movie, it almost forces me to be engaged in the story in some senses.
Yeah, because then all of a sudden, you the entire time, there's kind of that lingering question of like, kind of like we talked about last week, like, what's the deal with this thing? Like, who can use this, who can't? And then you start seeing things and you're like, oh, like this person can't use this thing, and like, but this person can. And then that becomes, you know, good versus bad storytelling. John Wick wouldn't be as good if then that coin didn't have other consequences.
Yeah.
Like if John was able to say like, no, I'm not doing that, go away, and the guy's like, oh, fine, and he just like leaves, and like you never see him again. Well, like
then the movie's over.
Yeah, then you're like, well, like what was the point of that whole coin thing, or like was it really even that big a deal? And then let's say like what happens in 3, like John cashes in his coin to Sophia, and then that same rule applies to another person, and then you see like what the dynamic is in like a similar scenario.
Yeah.
And in the same vein, like if John had said no to that guy, and he went away and you never see him again, there's like a whole different movie essentially that would ensue. And then if 3 happens and John goes to Sophia and she says no, but then he forces her to say it and she's like, oh, fine. Then it's like, well, wait, what? Like that information doesn't compute because the same rule doesn't apply. And I think, also kind of defining like lore, I feel like good lore in content is that there are things below the surface that exist that undergird the entire structure of the whole world and why people make decisions. Like Attack on Titan essentially is very deep in like lore and like rules and things that are at play that we don't necessarily know about. And so as soon as a piece of information about the lore is revealed, it makes all these other implications unfold where you're like, that's what this means and that's why this character did this, and all these things that were once like, why did that guy say that? Why is this character wanting to do this thing? It all starts to make sense, and then you're like, holy frick, like, we're all going to die.
I think Brandon Sanderson has a lecture on world building on YouTube, and he talks about how world building is kind of like an iceberg, and really all you want to show the audience is like the tip of the iceberg, and then that tip will kind of have implications and start to reveal like what's under the water just for this, by the sake of like being there, kind of.
Definitely.
Otherwise, you just overwhelm the person with like stuff that is unnecessary in a sense. So... Yeah, I'm curious, pulling back from like the analytical side.
Yeah, for sure.
What some of your favorite fight scenes were?
Yeah,
like, just
definitely.
from an action perspective.
I'm trying to remember from the first one. I think I haven't watched the first one in like 2 years, so I don't know if I have any specific fight scenes from that one. I think that the first movie was just seeing. Oh, I take that back. The club fight scene, and just like all the sneakiness that Wick has, where he like, shoots a guy in the foot, and then the guy's like, and he like leans over and like pop in the face, and then like, how he's like judo throwing guys, and he's like using them as like body shields and like kicking dudes in the face. I think in 2, one of my favorite scenes, and I had mentioned it earlier, is the silencer gunfight, where essentially just the setup is there's this other assassin, Cassian, who's has a silenced gun, and Cassian is up on this they're almost in like a train station or something.
Yeah, it's like a train station or airport or something.
And so Cassian's up really high and John Wick is down low, and they're John's trying to blend into the crowd, but he sees that Cassian sees him, and so they're walking at the same pace, and they're literally like arms crossed, like blind firing at each other with these silenced pistols.
Like trying to hide their pistols like close to their chest. Like,
and so like all you hear is just like and you just see like little kicks of dust like right behind them, or like John kind of like flinching and just like and so just like the creativity in that, they aren't just like running through this train station like firing at each other. Like again, there's a show in that moment. They're not about to just like kill all these innocent people, or like, but even then they're so desperate to kill each other that they're kind of putting other people in jeopardy.
You're almost better not hiding,
right?
Exactly.
You're just
gonna randomly shoot someone.
But because of that, essentially in that scene, they're communicating things. They're communicating that they're still trying to stay under wraps, like they're assassins or whatever, but they're like just doing all this stuff. I just remembered a scene from 1 that is probably one of my favorites. Is John just kills his house fight, his first house killing scene, where it's like just the rain and like the shadows and the silhouettes. Like, oh, it's so beautifully shot. But he just goes on this massacre in his house, and he's like killing all these guys. And then he like comes around the corner, and you see like police lights. And I remember being like, oh frick, this is gonna be interesting. And John goes to the door and he opens it, and then it's like this police officer, and he kind of like looks in, and I saw someone in the YouTube section I was watching, that scene came up in my feed, and someone in the section noticed that as soon as John opens the door, like the guy like looks in, and he like takes his police hat off, and he's like, hey John, and he's like, evening Jimmy, and he's like, you back in? He's like, kinda, and he's like, huh, and he's like, well, what are you here for, Jimmy? And he's like, noise complaint. And Jimmy's just like, noise complaint. And he's like, well, I'll be seeing you, John. And he just like leaves. And so just that amazing moment of like how much is communicated, where this specific police officer is like, I'm not messing with this. Like, he's just like, I have nothing to do with this. But there's this, everything is communicating. They're showing by him taking off his hat and just asking very basic questions and very basic, like, how's it going, John? And then when he leaves, they're not telling me that Jimmy has this understanding with the assassins. They're showing me that he just gets what happens. And then in the second movie, they have a similar callback too, where, this D-bag from earlier who's trying to get John in blows up his house, And then, you know, John and his dog are sitting at the ambulance, and then Jimmy comes up and he's like, hey, John. He's like, hey, Jimmy. He's like, gas leak. And then, you know, John walks off and Jimmy's just like, fudge.
Yeah.
Like, he knows the implications of that. So
yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to rant too much, but
No, you're good.
but I think those are some of my favorite moments in those movies. Harkening back to the gunfight. So I think the silence gunfight, John's house fight in 1, the club fight in 2, really all the gunfight scenes, I feel like. The catacombs 1 and 2 is so
shotty,
awesome.
When he switches to shotgun.
Yeah,
oh,
dude. Oh, it's so dope.
Yeah.
That's an awesome fight. The mirror fight scene, like when he goes to the museum and there's this whole this museum installation that he's fighting through, where like guys are like opening panels and like it's just all these reflections. Which, one, from a cinematography standpoint, my gosh, how did they do that? I want like an in-depth analysis, play-by-play of like how detailed
really hard
they had to get. Right, because
shoot.
like you're in an entire room of just mirrors, and so the possibility of like getting someone out of all those mirrors and stuff as they're moving, but keeping John Wick in and keeping these other guys who are like
and making
opening
so you
panels.
can't see the cameras and the crew.
Oh
and
my
stuff.
gosh, like that's just incredible. So that was one of my favorites, and they did something similar in 3, which was also one of my favorites. I think some of my favorite gun moments in 3 were probably when he fights the Japanese guys in the
That's a good one.
Yeah. And for once, there was a realistic motorcycle chase gunfight scene. Like, he's actually, like, on his motorcycle and actually, like, shooting out the tires or, like, shooting guys in the face and, like, doing things that make sense, where it's not just, like, dive and weave, like, you know, zipping through traffic. It's like they're on an open stretch of road and he's just, like, dodge the sword, grab the guy's arm, shoot him in the face, throw the sword into this guy's tire, and just, like, just chaos from that whole moment is just awesome. And then the last one being that probably my all-time favorite, just because of the vibe, was the gunfight in the Continental after Winston goes in the vault, and then it's just like neon green lights, and the guys had like these like special ops like order the table people come in and they throw smoke and they like have this heavy body armor, and Wick's got these,
I love
like,
the implication of that scene because like when he first goes in there, he's just like shooting them and it's not doing anything, which I feel like in other movies they might just take for granted that it's body armor.
Right.
But like eventually he starts like specifically aiming like for the neck between like the soft spot,
where he's like
between the helmet and the body
incapacitates them by just filling them with like 6 shots, and they're like on the ground like, oh my body, and then he like comes over and like rips their helmets back and like shoots them,
Gets
and
them in
then
the neck,
like rips open their visors and like shoots them, where again the rules, there's realism enough that this one man who's not wearing a flak jacket is probably going to make it out of this. But the fact that he actually has to he's not just like, oh, my gun just happens to be super powerful now. He's actually fighting in a way where he's like, I know I can't kill them by doing this, so I'm going to shoot out their knees, and like they have to feel that pain still, and in their incapacitated state, I'm going to roll over on the ground, rip back their visor, pop them in the face, do all, like, they're doing all this stuff that it's like, oh my gosh, it's just non-stop, but just crazy. And then when they like go back to the vault and they like reload and they like get the shotguns, and he and the concierge are like filling up all the shotguns and stuff, and man, that guy is probably one of the most underrated characters in that movie.
He's
like,
awesome.
I love in 2 when Wick makes his dog stay there, and he's just like, sit, good boy, and he like leaves, and the concierge just kind of like looks at him, and then when he comes back to get him, and he's like, did he behave? And he's like, I very much enjoyed his company. Like, it's just like they didn't do anything, but there's just so much vibe in these movies. I love it. But sorry, I rambled. Any favorite scenes that you really enjoyed?
My favorite one, probably of all of them, is the knife scene at the beginning of the third one.
Yeah.
And
That's
I think
awesome.
my favorite part is when the fight hasn't started yet, and he like is trying to find a gun because he doesn't have any weapons, and he like gets a gun.
That's a good,
And I don't know exactly why he had to take it apart and rebuild it, but I'm assuming it was,
I think it was the bullets
or
didn't
something.
fit. Like the bullets
so
he
had,
like
takes apart 2 guns, rebuilds a new like antique like
revolver,
57 Magnum or whatever it is, like this old school revolver, and like just as the guy gets there, he loads it, and it's just like boom. It's like the loudest revolver shot ever, and it's awesome. And then he goes into they're in some sort of like Chinatown like antique shop with all these like knives and stuff, and it's just this insane fight with him and like 10 Japanese dudes, and like when he's just chucking the knives, he's like doof, 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 and the guy like it just keeps getting up, and like eventually he gets the hatchet and just chucks it. Like, that whole scene was just insane.
Yeah,
like it was a crazy way to start the movie, I think.
Yep.
So
yeah,
and it helped give this sense of how many people really were like coming after him at this point, because that was when like every assassin got the text. Right. So
yeah, and seeing that John Wick doesn't just know how to use guns to kill everybody, like he's throwing knives, he's like
use everything,
stabbing people, he's throwing, it was just
cracking necks
bonkers.
With books. Yeah,
right, it was just craziness. So well, we're hitting that hour mark right on the nose. Any other final thoughts, anything? I think everyone should watch. Not everyone should watch these. If you're into action movies and you haven't watched the John Wick franchise, definitely worth watching. You absolutely need to dive in. I think it's
the other fight scene that comes to mind is the one in the desert with the dogs.
Oh, that whole scene was just amazing. Yeah, that's a great progression. So. Yeah, definitely. It'd be awesome to see Sophia's character and more, because I know they kind of alluded to like some of her backstory, and so it'd be interesting to see like what Lawrence Fishburne's character does, and like how Winston ends up making decisions. And
I think I missed something, I think, because I thought there was a little bit more left, so I quickly ran to the bathroom as the movie was ending, like, and I think I missed, like, did he get found by the guy in the alleyway?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I think
because I came back in and all of a sudden Lawrence Fishburne's character was standing there, and then it went to black, and I was like, "Frick! Did I miss the end?"
Yeah, because the one gal, or the what were they called?
Because she walked around the corner.
Yeah, and she comes back and she's like, "He's not there anymore." And he's
okay. See, I went to the bathroom right as she started walking around the corner. Yeah, and I was like, "Oh, the movie's just gonna end. It's fine."
Yeah, no, she like goes around the corner and then she goes back into the Continental to Winston, and she's like, "John Wick is not dead." Or she's like, "He's not there," and he's like, "Yes, well, we lose all the good ones and blah blah blah." And she's like, "No, he's gone." And he's like, "I don't care. Like, what is it to you?" And so then she kind of alludes to this, like, there's gonna be consequences for this, and then it cuts to that, I can't remember. It's the guy who is it Adrian or Pimento in Brooklyn Nine-Nine. That guy, I love that guy. He's awesome. But his character is wheeling John in a shopping cart, and he just kind of like throws him on the ground, and like John's laying on the ground. And that's probably where you came in, where Lawrence Fishburne's character is still alive, and he's like, "Are you pissed, John Wick?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm pissed." And then it cuts to black.
Okay, yeah. I missed like that just small part. Yep. I had to go to the bathroom.
So, but
dang, I'm excited for the next one.
Definitely.
To see what happens, because I feel like at this point now the world is kind of like crumbling. Like the rules.
Yeah.
Almost like too many rules have been broken, and now like somebody needs to pay.
Yeah.
For what's happened, and like John's no longer bound by any of the rules, which also means he can't really function normally in the world, because the world kind of abides by these rules. So it'll be interesting to see the consequences.
I'm really excited.
Like a more almost like underground type of, like an underground assault on the city kind of. So.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they're setting it up, and again, spoilers, but they're setting it up for like this really cool war with the High Table, and I'm just so stoked to see like, what does that end up meaning? What does that look like? Are things going to get real dicey? Because I could see there being some really cool lore rules where it's like you can't have fights in like public spaces. So they have like an arena or something where it's like, we need to go to like the Coliseum. And then it's like, oh, fudge. Like, meet at the Coliseum on like X date at this night. And like whoever walks out alive, like that's what happens. Like there being some kind of thing where like, because they clearly don't mesh with society perfectly, how they've kind of alluded to it, but they clearly are still in it. So what do they do to like navigate the fact that they're about to have this bloodbath with all these assassins? Yeah, it's interesting
because there's like the scene in the train station with the guns.
Yep.
Everybody was fine with that. Like nobody was running. Nobody was like screaming like, there's guns. Like the civilians were just kind of like, whatever. This happens every day.
Right.
So you get the sense that somehow public spaces and like the world kind of like just has gotten used to the fact that people are just shooting everything up or something. So it'll be interesting to see how they wage war in the city, and like, are there different turfs for different High Table members and stuff? So
yeah. Super.
It should be pretty cool.
Absolutely. So. Cool. All right. Well, we'll close it off from there. Thanks for tuning in. The next episode after this will be Netflix v. Spielberg. So we'll be kind of diving into what Spielberg's actual comments were regarding his, like, streaming movies not allowed in the Oscars and things like that, and actually looking at, are there some ways that he's maybe right? Are there some ways that he's maybe has some blind spots? Are there ways that maybe this is good for the movie industry, maybe it's bad? You know, what do we feel from like personal experience of actually going to the movies, and what do we care about award shows anyway? You know, like what are our feelings on that? So that'll be the next one. After that is, let me see. I think it's E3, I want to say.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, because I forget that you guys will be listening to the Imperious one a week ago. So this is the June 10th that this is coming out. 6/17 is Spielberg, and then 6/24 will be E3 2019 recap. So thanks for tuning in. As a reminder, check out popculturepunks.com for all your pop culture punks needs. And until then, we bid you a fond cowabunga.
Job security, but I've been dreaming about packing it all up, 'cause the war in me just won't relent till there's nothing left but dust. So what do you do when the walls start closing in, and everyone you love tells you it's all just in your head? And I wanna burn out in a brilliant burning place, don't wanna be stifled by the dry rot or the haze. I'm not giving up, I just don't have the time to waste all my days rewriting all these lies. I'm not giving up, I just don't have the time to spend another moment living someone else's life. Only takes us one way. Either we're honest with ourselves or we're lost in the parade. And each and every one of us will make the same mistakes, but it's in